I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is an antique sleigh bed, called sleigh bed because it resembles the front of a sleigh. It's American Empire, probably from about 1840. These beds the design is French in origin, but the American Empire period picked it up. That's distinguished by the figured veneer and these big scrolls you see here. This bed is wide enough for a queen. It's very unusual for an antique bed, but it needs to be made longer, so that's my job. Typically when I make an antique bed longer, it's almost always necessary to make entirely new rails. But these rails are so massive and so large, and I only have to add on a few inches. I think I can add on to these rails. This bed was originally held together by bed bolts in the French style, which goes in through here. The hole there is now plugged, but the bolt would go in this way. There's a nut in there to accommodate it. The bolts have these holes on the ends to accommodate, being able to turn it when it's in there. Good way to break your scratch all. Apparently the bed bolts were done away with some time ago, and these brackets were installed. They appear to be old brackets. So in other words, this piece goes on the end of this rail, just happens to have come off, and the rails go in there and lock into place. You can see where the tenons were plugged, and also there's a little bit of the hole. There's a nut in there somewhere, and they cut the tenons off and installed these. And we're going to go with these. The finish on the bed is not bad. It looks like an old refinishing job. The whole bed is very, very blonde. I don't know if it was done on purpose. I suspect it was because it's too evenly. Alright, I've got this honking big piece of mahogany here, which I'm going to mill up and edge glue to get the sizes I need to make the extensions. So what I'm doing here is, I want to make a lap joint on which to glue my extension for this rail. I'm going to use a router to cut that joint, and this is my router jig to guide the router. I'm trying to figure out a way to clamp it to this rail. Actually, I don't think it's going to work because my piece here isn't big enough, but I'll build it up on the sides and clamp it further out. I realized as I was adjusting my template that I needed to secure the rail to my bench here. Okay, I've got my joint cut on both rails. And of course I discovered when I cut these that these rails are actually made out of poplar and veneered. That kind of fooled me when I first looked at them. But they have a tremendous mahogany cap on the rails, and the veneer goes up over that joint, so from this side they really look solid. So anyway, my extension piece is mahogany anyway. It doesn't match this mahogany great, but I've gone through all my veneer with a thought to veneering the face of it. But I don't have anything really that matches this well enough. I might as well go with the mahogany I've got. So I'm going to cut the matching joint on my extensions the same way I cut these with that router template. Alright, so now I'm ready to fit my new piece, the extension, and glue it up. So you can see there's a space here, of course, and that's because I purposely left this too long. I've got to trim this part of my new piece now so that that fits in snug up against here. Because this rail is bowed, I'm a little bit high here, so I need to take a little bit of wood off the back of this area. I got to make sure my new piece is above the rail. So I took very little off with the table saw, but this bow right here, this high point, because this is veneered, I can't sand this board that much. I think that I need to possibly take a little bit more off my repair piece, but I also think I'm going to take some off the inside of the rail too. My joint looks really flat. It looks good, but I think I've got to plane this down a little bit, see if I can maintain that flat joint, but I've got to get this section above that section. Yes, that's better already, but I still got to take more off till I get the center section up. Alright, I think I've got it planed down well enough, as well as I'm going to get it. I'm going to glue it up now. the same procedure on the other rail. Luckily, the second rail doesn't have those bowing problems. This one fits fine, just like it is. So I'll just glue this on the same way as I did the other one. So I'm just realizing that the location of the hanger is different for the footboard and the headboard. That's maybe the first time I've ever seen a bed that had a difference in the hangers end to end. Usually they're interchangeable. That went down great. It's nice and strong. But I do need to tell you, I didn't just put this bracket on and come over and hook this up. I've been back and forth to the bench about 6 times with this thing, making micro adjustments, and it was just too fussy to videotape. All right, now I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with finishing. The first thing I'm going to do is clean this just with some commercial cleaner that I like. I've already sanded my new wood here to 100. I'm going to sand it with 150, then 220, and I'm going to lightly sand the whole piece with some 220. Okay, well now I've sanded the repair area of the bed rail all the way up to 220, and I've also sanded my cutoff to use as a sample. So now I've got three things I got to think about here. I have the new wood of my extension. I have old wood that's been sanded up to 220. Now the rest of this rail, I've cleaned it and I'm going to sand it lightly with 220 gold paper, which is just a non-filling paper I use for sanding finishes. Alright, I've got everything sanded. Now I'm going to put a little alcohol on this whole area and see how the three areas look together. So you can see here the new wood, so different. There's the sanded wood, which is darker and redder. And here's what we've got, this sort of a bleached out, very light, yellowish look to it. Well, the first thing I'm thinking about is the new wood and the fact that it has like zero yellow in it. So I have some golden oak stain and I'm going to try it on my cut-off sample here. That's interesting. I'm going to spray some aerosol shellac on just a little area here so I can see the color that I'm going for. Yeah, this stain looks like it has possibilities. I've got to let this dry and spray some shellac on my sample and then compare it to that. This is fast drying stain. It dries in 1 hour, but I'm just helping it along with the heat gun a little bit. I'll spray it now. I just want to get an idea of what we're looking at here. Oh, that's good. It's got my yellow in it, and it's still a tad lighter than the original finish. That's right where I want to be. Now, even though this sanded wood needs some yellow too, I don't want to put the oil stain on it because I'm afraid it's going to make it darker also. So I'm going to tape off my new wood and seal this old wood with shellac. All right, off camera I gave these a second coat of shellac with the aerosol, and so now I'm ready to stain the new wood. All right, I've let the stain dry for a couple hours. I'm going to just do a little tape off of the old wood area, and I'm going to spray at least 2 coats of shellac. My goal is to build up the finish to be the same level of build as the old finish. Okay, I actually put 3 coats of shellac on the new wood, and now remove these, and I'm going to sand the entire repair area here with 320 gold paper, and then spray this whole area with another coat of shellac. Alright, my repair area is kind of nice and smooth and even now. So I've got to do something, try to do something anyway, about this old wood that is darker because it got sanded. So I'm going to tape off my new wood and I'm going to tone it. I have a aerosol toner here, and the toner is lacquer with some stain in it. So this is called Natural Pine. And I think it looks pretty good as well. Well, that toning definitely, helps some, but I'm going to do it again. I may have to do it maybe even 2 more times. It's better, but I got a little ways to go here. So I was really hoping that overnight my color problem would go away, but it didn't, unfortunately. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, these dark mahogany areas, they've lightened up some with my toning. I'm going to go in now with some glaze and get them a little bit closer to the color, and then I think I will tone this whole area and kind of sunburst it into the color of the bed over here. So what I'm going to do, and I've already fooled around with it a little bit, I'm going to take a clear glaze coat and mix with it some ochre yellow oil stain, and that produced a color not unlike the color of the bedrails. Okay, now I'll let my glaze coat dry for about an hour, and then I'll go back in with the aerosols. Okay, my glaze is dried, You know, this is a tough problem here. We've got this bleached out mahogany, we have my new wood, we have the area where the old mahogany got sanded and is now returned to its original color. One solution would be to refinish the entire rails and blend in the new piece. But then you'd have to refinish the bed. And that's silly. The bed is beautiful. It's got a great color to it. So at this point, I'm just going to tone. I'm going to use some raw umber toner. I'm going to try to make this look as good as I can and sort of fade or sort of sunburst into the old finish. So between coats of my aerosol toners on the rails, I'm going to go over the headboard and footboard just with a real gentle, mild solution of a commercial cleaner I like using, and then I'll polish them with the beeswax polish. Alright, I sprayed a couple more coats of toner on this end of the bed and just let it fade into the light part. The color's not bad. It's actually similar to the darker parts of the bed. Now, if you remember the rails, I cleaned and I sanded, and I'm just going to give them a quick little French polish thing here. Well, so, you know, I've got to face reality here and say, this looks pretty bad. I've got to redo it. I've got to start over again. I'm going to wash off everything I've done with lacquer thinner, and I'm going to try to bleach the wood that's been made darker by sanding. You know, I keep thinking about how good the new wood, the extension pieces, looked with that golden oak stain on it. So I'm thinking I'm going to tape off the old wood, stain and seal the new wood. Then I'm going to attempt to bleach just the dark area here. Okay, I've let the stain dry. Now I'm going to seal this with the vinyl sealer, the aerosol here, and then I'll sand the sealer when it dries and some gloss lacquer. I just feel like maybe that'll stand up better to against the bleach solution I'm going to put right next to it. Alright, I've let the sealer dry for a couple of hours. Now I'm going to sand with 320 and spray it with gloss lacquer. Alright, I've let this lacquer dry overnight, and we'll see if the bleach will work on just this area here. Alright, this is 2-part wood bleach, made for this purpose. I guess it's sodium hydroxide, maybe hydrogen peroxide, I'm not positive about that. You mix it together 50-50. Alright, so what's next? I discovered a couple things here. You know, the bleach can work. Also, though, when I stripped the finish off the old rails, the wood became quite a bit darker. A lot of that color just might have been in the finish. So what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to sand. This is rough. I've got to sand this at an angle to make it smooth. And I'm going to start just lightly sanding the whole rail and just see kind of what it looks like. I'm sanding at a 45-degree angle. You know, the fibers of the wood, because of the water in the bleach, the fibers have raised up. And I'm trying to roll those fibers over and cut them off. I don't want to just push them back down. So after just smoothing it with a 220, now I'm sanding with 150, and I like what I'm seeing so far. So I've sanded these really well with 150, just by hand. You know, they're not flat. I don't want them to be flat, nor did I try to sand out a lot of the scars and defects and stuff. I'm hoping these will still look old. I'm going to put a coat of shellac on them now, to which I've added some yellow dye stain. But first, I'm going to tape off my new wood. I'll coat these with shellac, and then it'll give me an idea of what color I want to stain the new wood with. This is 12 ounces of shellac, thinned out, probably somewhere between a 1 pound cut and a 2 pound cut. And I've added 6 ounces of yellow dye stain. You know, the idea being is that this finish has a lot of yellow in it. It's really yellowed. And so this will get me off to a start. All right, these look good. I think the yellow really helped to keep it light. My greatest concern is how dark these are going to be. They're still really red, so maybe tomorrow I'll put a coat on and I'll add some green to it, or add blue to what I've already got to make it a little greener. So I've let this dry overnight, and it looks good. I've still got to do more work on this color, but the next thing I have to do is stain my new wood to this color. I have a sample block here that I'm going to try some dye stain. I have some medium brown walnut dye stain, which I've thinned out probably more than 50-50. Yeah, that seems like a pretty good color. It has the right amount of orange in it. See, the nice thing about dye stains is that my color's a little light, and so I put on a coat, then you can go back and add more and keep darkening it till you get just to the level that you want. I can just keep adding it and making it as dark as I need for it to be. And in fact here I'll get fancy and try to continue some of the stripes. Alright, I've let this dye stain dry for a couple hours. Now I'm going to put on a clear coat of shellac. I think first I'm going to take my markers and do touch up on some of the putty I've got here. Now this is just clear shellac I'm doing on the new wood. I want to get it caught up to the rest of the bed rail. Okay, so my sealer coat on my new wood is dried. Now I'm going to put a coat on the entire bed rails. Now remember, this coat I put a lot of yellow in the shellac, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that same shellac that I had the yellow in. Now it's green. That's going to help me kill the red on the bed rails. Okay, last night, off camera, I put another coat of clear shellac on here and let it dry overnight. And I think this looks good. I'm not going to put any more color or anything on it. I'm going to sand it and give it a final coat. Alright, I'll let this dry overnight. Alright, this is dried overnight. They look good. I'm anxious to set the bed up. this is it. This nice antique sleigh bed. It's now big enough for a queen-size mattress, which is pretty amazing for an antique bed. And even though the color on the rails was problematic, I think it looks pretty good.